Now, this is not a worship service. This is a time of presentation, and so we're going to show the pictures, and then we're going to allow questions to be asked during the session. In other words, if you have a question, you have a right to ask that question, whether it's a man or a woman. It's not a worship service. I want to introduce Jim. Some of you don't know Jim like I do. I've known him for over 40 years. And we have traveled together in foreign countries and preached the gospel and been associated for a long time. And several years ago, Jim was living in the Houston, Texas area, and he decided he wanted to preach the gospel. And so he moved to Yakima, Washington, and worked there, which means that he can wire whole banks of controls for a warehouse or business. And then he decided he wanted to study Greek. He wanted to study New Testament Greek. So he moved his family down to Cottage Grove, and then Eugene, Oregon is where he got his education in the Greek language. And the reason that he did that was because he wanted to be able to dig deeper into the scriptures and understand more about the Bible. Now, Jim and I have traveled to the Philippines and to Malaysia. We held a meeting together, and India. And we were able to convince the brethren in the Philippines that they were worshiping in error, and they took their stand with us that very evening. And from that time on, that work continued. Brother Deneau was one of the ones that took his stand with us and became a very prominent figure in the mission work in the Philippines and also the work in Hawaii. He died of cancer, so he's no longer with us. And Jim and I went to Malawi then and held a week's meeting there in that area. And then from there we went to India, and there we baptized 15 on that first trip. Later on, Jim went back over there and baptized 45 on one trip. And so then we have been associated with the African work for a long time. And some of you may not know the history of that work, but in the early 50s, we received a Macedonian call from an African native over there asking for somebody to come and help them to understand the truth. And that plea kept coming out in Old Paths Advocate over and over again, and it seemed that nobody would answer that plea. So one day, I told Wilma, I said, I think you'd go to Africa if the brethren would send me. And just that quick, she said, I'd go with you. At that time, she was in her early 20s. We had not been married very long. She was willing to leave her twin sister and her other 3 siblings and go with me to that field in Africa that was unknown by any of the brethren. Nobody that we knew had ever been to this country. And so it took a long time for us to get permission to even enter that country. It was a British protectorate, which meant that it had British laws and so on. So it took a while before we could ever get permission to go. And then when we finally went, it took us about 6 weeks to make the trip. And some have wondered how it was that we were able to be away from churches for 6 weeks. Well, you know, the apostles traveled into various areas before there was ever a congregation in an area. And they had to observe the worship service regardless of where they were, and that's what we did. On the ship, we worshiped every Lord's Day, just Wilma and I. And then after that, and that was in the year 1952. Then in 1958, I felt that there was a need to go back over there and to further strengthen the work. So I wrote to Galen Osborne. He and I had grown up together in the same congregation in Los Angeles. And we understood the strength of each other and our determination to do what was right. I said, if you'll volunteer to go to Africa, I'll volunteer. He had 4 children at that time, and the youngest one was about, well, when we left, she was 4 months old. And so that took a lot of faith and a lot of strength on their part. When we got over there, the first time, Will and I moved into a native village somewhere down in this region called Wendy. We moved to a house that was vacated by a native family. It had dirt floors and had a grass roof and plenty of spiders. And there were lots of poisonous snakes in that area. They killed 3 snakes not very far from our door. And then one night, one of the boys stepped on one that was deadly poison named Petey. And if it had bitten him, he died within 10 minutes. Fortunately, it didn't bite him and rather severe killed. There was when Galen and I moved over there, we moved back into that same village and went to work to try to build up the cause. When we moved there, we didn't realize the civil disobedience and upheaval of that country. I took a rifle in order to hunt baboons. Well, when I got over there, they confiscated my gun because of the civil problems. And Galen and I were there during that civil upheaval. They got their independence in 1964, at the time that James Orton and Jerry Cutter were there. In 1991, Jim was approached about going over there because of a need, and he accepted the invitation to go. And when he got over there, he told them he was not there to be their boss. He was there to work with them. And that's the way he conducted himself with those brethren. Now, some of you don't know that the work in Malawi is the greatest work in the world today. And one of the ways that we know that is because of the results of the preaching of the gospel by the native preachers. And we have hundreds, over 4,000 congregations in that little country right there now. Now, this is a report from one of the preachers this congregation helps support. Some of you don't realize the results, and so I'm going to mention them before I turn this over to Jim. This is from Christopher Severe. Now, E.C. Severe was his great uncle, and he passed away with malaria. Bennett Severe is his father, and he's still living, but he's frail in health and probably won't be with us for very much longer. In this report, for the month of February, there were 16 confessions of faults. There were 3 restoration members and 23 baptisms. And at this next place, there was an attendance of 1,040 people, and that's more people than attend our 4th of July meetings, either in Oklahoma or here in Springfield. And there were 9 confessions of faults and 18 baptisms. This next place, there were 18 confessions and 11 baptisms. This next place, there were 16 confessions and 22 baptisms. So you see, the work is going on, and these men that are doing this work are supported by this congregation. I have another report from one of the other preachers that we support. And this is from John Smoke. Now, John was living there when Galen and I were there. He was just a young fellow at the time. And he had 1,361 people, the size of the crowd at one place, and had 100 baptisms. That's more baptisms than we've had here in the United States in I don't know how long, by any one preacher. And here's another one, 350 in attendance, 261 in attendance, 11 baptisms, 22 baptisms, 4 baptisms. So you can see that the work is going on. And it is the greatest work in the world because we've got more congregations than any other place, and we've got more preachers over there, native preachers. Now, Jim is invited every year to go over there and to conduct studies. The studies are not set up by Jim. They're set up by the brethren in Malawi, and he gets an invitation. They want him to come over and conduct those studies. These are lists of the studies that have been conducted last year.
This last, I just have just the last year.
Yeah.
But I have one previous years.
Yes. Now, Greg's been over there, and he has witnessed the crowds that they have to come. And some of these people walk for miles and ride bicycles for miles in order to listen to the gospel, to learn. Now, they hunger and thirst after knowledge of the scriptures. And that is encouraging to us over here because we have such, well, you can look at the crowd and see the lack of interest. And when we see the results that are taking place over there, and when Jim goes for those studies, he doesn't go for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, he goes for months. Starting in June, he did last year, June, and went through October. Now, that isn't a study and then a few days rest and so on. It's day after day after day. And when he finished his studies last year, in October, he came back home. And when he got home, he had bleeding of the brain. And he had to have surgery, emergency surgery, in order to correct that. And it's taken time for him to recuperate from that serious setback. But he's made a lot of progress. They've invited him back for more studies, and this year he plans to go back and study again. And his wife has serious health problems, but she is a preacher's wife, an unusual preacher's wife. And she understands the need, and so she consents to his being gone for months at a time in the Lord's work. I'll turn it over to you, Jim.
I appreciate what Paul has told you here this evening. To begin with, I have a speech impediment, and I hope that you will bear with me because of that. I hope to say my brain functions well. When I sit down at the computer, I have no problems thinking. I have problems with my speech. I only require speech therapy, and that's by the grace of God that He granted me this privilege of being able to be here today. I only thank the Lord for those blessings that He gave me. Evidently, He saved me for something else in this life. And I'm glad to be of service to you. I want to mention the fact that that I am responding to a call for allowance. I emphasize that because the brethren in Lebanon received ample requests for my presence there. I have not read those letters. They have told me about it, but I have not read them yet, and I probably will not read, because that's the Malawians suggesting to the congregation to send me. They are the ones who have invited me, and if God be willing, if things go well with me, I'll know by, I think that Phil May, the doctor, will, I think, release me for that trip to Malawi. As I said, my thinking is swift. My speech is not what I want it to be. But if I stick with my notes, I say everything that I want to say. But I have something to say tonight. We would not have been in the country called Malawi were it not the faith of one man and his wife who were willing to be a sacrifice for the cause of our Lord Jesus Christ. This man believed with all of his heart that the Great Commission was not for the apostles only, but for their successors who believed that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. In October of 1952, after traveling by sea from New York, Paul and Wilma Nichols reached the Mozambican port city of Beira. It was there they had to take the narrow gauge train over to Limbe, at that time Nyasaland. Today it is Malawi. And Limbe is a suburb of the city of Blantyre. After reaching Limbe, they were met by Brother E.C. Severe, who took them out to Windy Wing Village. They arrived in Limbe at night, drove on to Windy Windy that same night, and that was about 30 kilometers, and were introduced to their quarters that night without the benefit of electric lights. Needless to say, on the following morning, Wilma took note of her house, but more especially of the memory of the home she had left behind. They were vastly different. Oh my. She now looked at a thatched roof with all the creatures it concealed by day and walked by night, and a carpet of bare earth. She was in what we would call the bush. But faith overrode what must have been anxious moments for both Paul and Wilma. The late Bill Davis said it well. He said in effect this: Paul and Wilma Nichols showed a lot of courage to do what nobody else had previously done in our brotherhood. In other words, Bill was making reference to nobody in this country of our fellowship ventured outside of this country until that man. Paul and Wilma made sacrifices of unbelievable proportions to lay the foundation of the greatest work we know, that we have known since the days of the apostles. Now, I don't know what lay in the preceding generations, but as far as we can determine, there has been no greater work, at least in our lifetime. I could not have agreed more with Bill. From this one work alone, the gospel has spread to Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Tanzania, and even Kenya. And I mention Kenya because those brethren, and one of them was a young man, Stephen Kasinda, when Paul lived there. Stephen went with me at my request and the congregation's request at the Lebanon to see if there was sufficient evidence or the sufficient reasons to gather a work there in that country. We found it over in the Lake Victoria area, and I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken, 21 congregations who are now with us. As we can always expect, though, the devil was not asleep. Paul suffered verbal abuse from a few brethren here, not all, but from here in the States, who obviously did not know that Africa was not America. They did not know that the gospel was given to the world according to American customs and culture. That they did not know that. So Paul wrote to people of his day before America was ever discovered. I'm thankful to God for brethren here in the States who trusted Paul not to violate the Scripture in his effort to spread the gospel. And I can assure you that trust was never, ever violated. When Galen and his family accompanied Paul, and Paul told you about his Galen's and his family, 4 children, and Paul, Willem, and Paulette were on that trip back to Nyasaland. When they got there, Brother E.C. Severe proved to be less than an honorable man in his dealings with him. Of course, that caused anguish among them. I do not wish to dwell upon this matter of E.C. Severe, for it is a story only Paul and Galen can tell. But I do want you, brethren, to know that the seed which Paul Nichols had sown was not sown in vain. It thrives today. In fact, it has lasted 62 prosperous years this coming October. I didn't know E.C.'s brothers. I didn't know Hippo Severe, but I understand that Hippo was a good man too. He died not long after I arrived in Malawi. I am knowledgeable of E.C.'s younger brother, Benny. And he is a person that I very thoroughly appreciate and respect him for his dedication to the truth. Bennett informed me that all the congregations which he was associated with, and that was over 300 by the way, held to the teachings they were first taught by Paul Nichols. This was not only including the 1 loaf and 1 cup doctrine, but teachings as it pertained to Christian living and conduct as well. It was explained to me that Paul Nichols taught the Bible. It was a change. It was a change related to support, but not in doctrine. And by the way, Paul taught music there. The late brother James Marty, who was about 100 years old when he died, sang to me a song that Paul Nichols had taught him. After E.C. Severe convinced other brethren that not from here in the States to support his father. And I believe that was the Cloud 9 brethren out of Arizona. If you're familiar with that, for those people, they had a radio program years ago. I don't know what you can get it here in this area or not, but I don't know if it still continues or not. But they are the Cups Persuasion brethren. These people in Malawi, there were brethren who refused to follow E.C. Severe because they considered E.C. an unjust man, and he was. But not all of his brothers were. But culture being what it was, the culture prevailed a little while. When James Orton and Jerry Cutter went on their fact-finding trip to Malawi, they had about given up hope. That is, until the elder, Brother Donald Nakatapa, searched for them on the streets of Blantyre. Brother Nakatapa had heard that James and Jerry were in the area, so they went looking for them, even though he was not acquainted with them. James Orton told me personally, I had the privilege of visiting very closely with James when Dennis Smith was in the hospital in Johannesburg, lying near death. But James told me that he remembered it well when Brother Nakatapa approached him, because he had been sitting on the curb not far from the Riles Hotel, heaving from an upset stomach. So he remembered it very well. Of course, James came to Johannesburg when Dennis lay gravely ill in the Johannesburg General Hospital. And I had the privilege of visiting James because we shared the same quarters in the Baptist guest house. Brother Nakatapa had not been a follower of E.C. Severe's father, and let James and Jerry know that there were others who had not strayed from what they had learned from Paul Nichols, the doctrine that Paul taught them out of the Bible. The truth is, all the men who have followed Paul Nichols were building on the foundation of the truth that this man laid. We cannot take from those men who followed Paul anything, and we appreciate everything. They are to be appreciated for their contribution for the work's sake, and that is, it should be. But they need to know who pioneered the work which made their effort a success. I regret that very much that Brother Raleigh Criswell is not here with us tonight. He is a man who converted Brother Davison Kasangwe. There are numerous congregations along the Monkey Bay area as a direct result of the conversion of Davison Kasangwe. From that one man, I don't know how many congregations that this man has contributed to their numbers today. I believe that you are blessed today with this man in your presence, whose sacrifice was to go into Africa to preach the gospel. Nothing else. I am blessed to have the privilege to sit, as it were, at his feet to learn from him what it takes to be on a mission effort for the Lord. And by the way, the school of hard knocks is a school of learning. And Paul learned in that way. The photos which I'm to show you this evening reflect a spiritual outgrowth which exceeds that of which Paul Nichols himself could not visualize. Before I left Malawi, we had 4,037 congregations listed as being registered. Now, I included in the registration Brother Roy Lee Criswell's record. I also, from that, which records kept by Bill Davis, I kept those records, and every congregation that has been recorded in Malawi when I was there has been documented. When I first went to Malawi, I was told by the Malawian brethren there were less than 700 congregations in the country. By the grace of God and through the efforts of the preachers that were there, upon encouragement, they were busy. They alone are responsible for the congregations that we documented. These brethren sometimes have to be encouraged, but that's what we're for. If we can encourage them to do what they can do best, then we should do it. I appreciate Brother Greg Harris for his contribution to that work. Greg went there, not on a safari, but Greg went there to preach the gospel. He sometimes had 3 appointments in one day, and we kept him busy the whole time he was there. We did not slack off on him a bit. He was young and vibrant, and he was a candidate for being used. So, but we appreciated him so very much, and the brethren there would still appreciate him when he comes back the next time. Last year, as I said, I was there for 4 months. I want to, Greg, if you could do this for me. Give them that, if that was sufficient. There we go. That is the itinerary fixed up by the Malawian people, not me.
These are the studies.
Yeah, these are the studies of, and this. In addition to the studies, these thank you. Now that last list there are the meetings on the weekend.
These are Lord's Day services.
These are Lord's Day services. Now, when we were there this past year, before that I left here, I arranged with Brother Kasambwi, Brother Kasinda, and thank you, the itinerary. Because people were having to travel what they call the centers, where everybody could come together. They could not all come because of transportation costs, or simply just too far to walk. And so we arranged that we spread out these studies so that people could come. And so sometimes there were fewer people in the assembly of the study, but we have more than made up for it because of another study down the road, so to speak. We had this past year, and I jotted these things down on my paper here as the documented evidence. We had 5,446 people to attend these studies. Now, I think that the proof is in the pudding. And so I rest my case on that particular point, that these people were involved in study. We opened it up for men and women. When we were there, we said, okay, the Bible says when Moses laid the law down in the book of Deuteronomy, he said, gather the people together, the men, the women, and the children, and the strangers. Now, we did all of that. And because that was a precedent, even in the days of the disciples, the men and the women and children all gathered around the Lord Jesus Christ. And so we think we have good example for that. And so I believe that brethren, not only men, but women need to give an answer of the hope that lies within them too. So we taught is the best that I can teach. The scriptures. And this past year, this subject was sin. And sin covers a lot of territory. And so that was our subject. At this time, I want to give to you some presentation here from the slides here. But maybe before I do that, can we put the light on this right here?
That's better, that's why we put it on there. I'll turn the center one on there.
Okay. I want the light on here because this country of Malawi is a very long country. When I go up here in Zomba district right here, I can look over into Mozambique and just turn around and go on the other side of the mountain there, and we can go, this is Zomba here, look at Mozambique over here. So you don't have to go off the mountain. You can see Mozambique both ways. And whenever on the Zomba ridge here, and looking out over this plateau right here, over into Mozambique, you are looking over 1,000 congregations. In that place alone, you can stand and see the area over 1,000 congregations in that area. Village after village after village after village. Those preachers doing wonderful work. But I want to tell you here, in these little villages here, we have congregations from here at the Mozambican border all the way up to Chiwanga here in the northern part of this country, where it borders Tanzania and borders Zambia. In this part right here that come together right there, there are over 9 congregations in that immediate vicinity there. And they speak 5 languages. If you don't think that that is a hard thing to do, when you speak in Chichewa, translate in Chichewa, translate into Buku, and translate it into whatever else, you lose it. It's a bad situation when you go through 2 translators. But we did it. There was this place up in here, and all this area here, where they call Chitipa area here. That's the Chitipa in this area here. That Fisher Magona, I think, had word that somebody from up in this part here were inquiring about the Church of Christ. And so a man was sent from Mzuzu up to there. Now that was where we came in. The Lord's money was the Lord's work. And so we contacted this brother. He was not a preacher at the time, but he was well versed in Scripture. And we asked him to go up here for that work. He was a Tumbuku English and Chichewa speaker. And so we can converse with him. And so he went up there, and he's still there today, doing the Lord's work. And that is where he came from. His home area was in Zuzu, and that is Tumbuku language that was spoken there. But this is the country of Malawi, from here to here. And I don't really know offhand how much distance that, I just know it takes 2 days. It's really a rigorous fight.
You've been all the way.
Oh my, I've been from here to here many times, from here to here. I didn't go into game parks because there was not a church there. So I don't really have any use for the game parks.
Show us where you lived for 14 years.
Okay, I lived here in the city of Blantyre. And the most of the area that the church is saturated in this, the lower regions here, but about Monkey Bay right here. This is the Monkey Bay area. And that is saturated. We even have congregations down on this side. They were started when I was there. A brother came over by canoe from this point here. Came over by canoe and started a congregation over there. And so those buttons work. They really work. So I just wanted to tell you that this country, I perhaps am the only Zungu that travel most of the roads there.
How long is that lake, do you remember?
I don't remember, Paul. It's something about 700 kilometers. No, it's more than that.
Got about 400 species of fish.
It's more in that lake than any lake in the world.
And some fish that are not found anywhere.
That's right. It's the deepest, one of the deepest lakes. Yeah.
That's in that fault line.
Yeah, it is a major fault.
What's the name of that lake?
Lake Malawi.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's made. It was Lake
Yes.
Nyassa when Paul lived.
Okay.
when the Africans got their independence, things changed. They changed names, changed the money
Yeah,
and so forth.
yeah, even Zambia changed the name,
Mhm.
Northern Rhodesia, when it was Southern Rhodesia,
Mhm.
that became Zimbabwe. Mozambique has always been Mozambique.
Yeah, well, that was Portuguese East
Yeah,
Africa.
it's Portuguese.
Tell them about that pointer you brought in.
Oh, this is a unique, this is one that was used, and I saw one, I didn't see it used, but I was in a police station where there were people convinced either way of their innocence. They may say that they were guilty because of that. And the hippo tail, now this is not the tail, it's just a strip of hippo hide. But the tail of the hippo,
It's much larger than that.
oh yes, it must much larger and more persuasive. It really was persuasive.
Lived.
Listen, yeah, that's it, but because that right there is, when it's laid on your back, you will admit to anything. I mean, okay, I will go through this procedure here.
This will give you some idea about the size of their studies that they have over there in Jim Groves.
Yeah, this is typical of what we encountered there. This here is the Blantyre congregation. These were the people that, some of them met me at the airport, and when I arrived there at the compound, and that area is a little over 3 acres, they were there to greet me. And that certainly,
Now, that's the church building in Glen.
yeah, that's a church building there in Blantyre. And by the way, just to tell you something here, this iron here was there for a reason. Because 8 thieves came into the Lowry yard. 2 AK-47. 4 of them took my house, and 4 of them took this building here.
And they stole your
We
stuff.
we had to put security up on the church building.
And they stole your stuff while you were in bed.
Oh, yeah, and I dare not come out, but that was another story.
Show them where you are. Nobody can tell.
Well, can you see that snowstorm? That's the greeting that I received from the brethren, from different congregations. These people were from different congregations. And
Jim was loved by those people over there, and that's an indication of it right there.
oh, yeah. And I love them. No doubt about it. And Greg had probably more than that when we arrived. I'm not be jealous of you.
There'd be 2 guys on one little chair in the building. That was, they did everything they could to squeeze in there.
Yes, okay, you. This is in Chickawa District on the east side of the Sherry River. They had to meet out in places like this. And you see that chair there? That's a homemade chair. That's what you call homemade. And these are also homemade. They work for hours and days and probably weeks.
With hand tools.
Yes, if they had them too. But these all handcrafted from lumber that strayed. But that's Stephen Cassenda sitting next to him. That's a wonderful place there.
Now, he was just a boy when he came to Windy.
Yes, and he went on to become a school teacher, and after he became a school teacher, I believe that Bill persuaded him to translate for he and Davison to be the translators. Oh, this is what they call an inculquate. That is the grain, where they place the grain whenever they have a crop, and which every year they do not. Some years good and some years very, very bad. And these are, when they have a crop, field those areas there. That's in the Coquitlam.
It's comparable to silo here.
Yeah.
Where they put their corn in.
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, well, they put the corn in there in the husk. And that way, it, from these areas, from this lid, I call it a lid, but they call it different from that, but to keep the rain out. Great. Now, this was the preachers and leadership study. That was a study. Now, it wasn't this past year. I didn't take as many photographs this year as maybe I should have. But I tell you what, when you go out early in the morning and it's late at night when you come in, the only thing that you want to look at is feet. And this past year, I don't know what my bleeding started. I have indications that as I look back at the situation, I was very, very tired. I was just too exhausted. But I still continued. I kept everything that on this
Schedule.
yeah, that's the paper I'm going to tell you. But those were the brethren who were in
What time
attendance.
would you get up in the morning, Jim, to start those trips?
If I went up to the long way, I would probably get out by 5 o'clock. And then if I'm up in Zuzu, about 2 o'clock. And I have driven it all the way to Zuzu, and the same day come back, and in the morning go another place. I've done that many times.
Did you get that for you?
But
To Missouri? You didn't get
No.
to Missouri?
He didn't go that far.
no, we only did the 5 o'clock in the morning. Trip back. Monkey Island was the farthest we had to go before we came back.
Monkey Bay.
And that almost got you, didn't, 5 o'clock.
Well, I got a picture of him passed out, so he crashed before me.
Well, that's a story.
This is the in Sanjay district. This is over here. This is in this area here. Right in this area here. And there.
Is that Chihuahua down there? Below Chihuahua?
Yeah, it's below Chihuahua. It's where you came in to Malawi on the narrow gauge, right?
Is that water behind it?
No, this is not water here. No. But this is Stephen Cassenda, who was my translator that day. And these are the main preacher here that we worship for. Brother Kwasi, he had that ocean, that worm that gets in your eye, oceanocrosis, something like that. That is more Greek than I can understand. But anyhow, he had those worms in his eyes. It's frequently called river blind.
Yeah.
River blind. But he has thick glasses. But this was a little meeting. It was just as they were enthused as the rest of them.
Are these all preachers here, Jim?
I'm sorry?
Are these all preachers?
Yeah, these are preachers here. And the church leaders too. I don't know which one was which. I can't remember that much in my brain. It's not possible. Oh, this is deceiving. You think this is the arbor here, and they were sitting outside.
Now, those people are sitting on the ground, right?
Oh yes, oh yes. Show the next one there. Now, you can imagine now, when I'm in here, this was the chief. And so I had the chief to stand in order to photograph all of this and all of this. So I had a motive for that.
Look at the crowd sit down.
Oh yeah, it's not uncommon.
Now, some of
That
them-
was the chief, but was he a member?
No, well, I don't know. He could have been a member, but
Their chief will come to all that.
I didn't know. I didn't ask the brethren there, at least I don't remember asking.
But
if
the
he was a member.
chiefs often attend the services of the church.
Yeah, and quite often they are members too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't remember questioning
So
him.
that's a village chief.
Yeah. Next one. This is Goma, and Goma is right here. In this area right here. In the Chickawa, it's almost out of Chickawa district. But this is the Goma congregation where I conducted a study. Well, that was a 2-day study. That was the year previously. It's representative of those areas. I do have some of this right here. It's 23.
You need the light, babe.
I crossed up this anyhow. This is a congregation, pending congregation. The one previously to that was Goma congregation. This was the Goma congregation. And this was also in Chickawa district, the other grade. This was also in the Chickawa district, but far from the other congregation.
Look at the roof on the church building.
Yeah. You know, brethren, these are just mud brick. And Greg has seen mud brick. And whenever this water flows down off of this roof right here, more than likely, after about a year or two, the water goes down the bricks and they are dissolved.
You're right, so.
Yeah, they're dissolved. This is a congregation here, the Musa congregation in Cholo district. And the bananas grow here in this district. Chola district. Okay?
There's banana trees.
Yeah. And they always gave me bananas too. And I enjoyed it. This is not a large congregation. It's called the Milani congregation, and that is Mulanji district. Okay, the next one. This is the congregation which our brother Swade is the preacher of. This congregation, and he more than one congregation that he has responsibility for to train and for the leadership and other preachers that he has trained. Brother Swade is the brother that was at the mission. He's the gardener, but he does this so well.
Show the crowd.
Here is the crowd. You cannot see because of this tree here, all up in here, all down and around, over by that band, and all underneath the tree. It's a large work, brethren. Now this is the congregation that I guess this wrong here, okay. Macumba congregation. I want to go over here. This is Mount Mulanji in this area right here. This is behind the mountain. You have to go Maloza right here. But Maloza and go and behind this right here is a route, if you call it that. Sometimes it's not very much of a route. That congregation is here. Okay, the next one. This is the Musa congregation, and that's also in this area. This is in this area right here, of Mulanji district. Many congregations, many
What
congregations.
kind of trees up there? Recognize-
Well, I tell you what was in this tree that kept me from going near it. There were honeybees there, but those honeybees in that tree are called killer bees. And over here in the
African killer
States.
bees, yeah.
And you do not want to stir them up.
Well, what's that big tree right there? Is it-
I don't know.
I didn't recognize it.
I don't
I
know.
see banana trees over here on the left.
Yeah,
Now,
but I don't know. It's just,
Jim,
yes, ma'am.
is this just the men of the congregation?
Yeah, this is just men.
Okay.
I failed to take, I did take some pictures, but I have my loaded up with pictures in my computer and I don't know what to do with it. So
The women didn't get any picture.
on this particular trip, no. But
Did-
this last trip I took, women were included.
Do the women attend the meeting too, or is it just typically the men?
Say again.
Do the women attend the study, or do they
They
typically just the
attended,
men?
they by invitation attended this past year.
Okay.
Yeah, they were invited. As I said, the procedure with Moses, whenever the law was read, men, women, children, and a stranger.
Right.
So that was our precedence for that.
This is Stephen, Davidson,
For some,
Cassandra,
Cassandra.
Cassinda?
right here.
that's, tell us about Cassandra.
Yeah, that's what I wanted.
Well, we couldn't tell that to you.
Yeah,
Tell us
just
about
one day.
Cassandra.
Cassandra was a man that was converted by Roy Lee Criswell in, I'm not sure what year,
68.
68. Okay, but he was converted by Roy Lee. And Jerry, I think, was the first to use him as a translator. But boy, when he was on to it.
Well, tell us about her background and so on.
Davidson, okay. I was remarking to Paul and Greg here that he has entitlement to a chief position in the village of Catoli, because it is in Catoli village that his father was born. And so he had a legal right to the heir of Catoli village. Now, he also has the right by his stepfather at the village in Takataka. In Takataka, here, this village here. This is the area here that he is entitled to, and all over here in the Takataka, he was entitled to village chieftainship in both places because of his stepfather, because he was chief. And so he did not take either one. He designated his chieftainship to others in both cases because he is a preacher of the gospel. That was what Davidson, Cassandra, gave up the chieftainship
To be a preacher.
to be a preacher. And so I admired him. I love Davidson Cassandra. I can't express the way I love him and Stephen Cassandra because of their dedication for the cause of Christ. They are dedicated men. And even though they are not supported today, they still carry on. And they will carry on until they are dead. So their own mouth said that. Okay. This is a congregation out of Mangochi district. This congregation, I believe, I've got, I'm not sure how the 27, back up here. Okay. That was Kampanjiri congregation in Mangochi district. Mangochi is situated Mangochi here. This congregation, when Paul lived in Malawi, Nyasaland, this was all jungle here. And this congregation comes here and goes up into this area right here. That was the congregation. No, I'm sorry.
Needs more lights, Greg.
Give me the light. Okay, I'm correct here now. The Mangochi district here.
That's Monkey Bay over
You know, here's Mangocha here. Yeah, right here. This was all in the mountains here. That was south of Monkey Bay. And Mangocha is here. That's where the congregation is here. Yesterday I was at the doctor's office to have fitted for glasses. I think maybe,
More of our mine.
okay. This is Potagoma congregation here. The Potagoma congregation is near Mount Mulangi, on the eastern side of Mount Mulangi. Some of these preachers here, I believe it was, I think it was seven preachers from the Mozambican side of the border. They were crossed over and came to our meeting at Potagoma. Okay, second. This is a little village of Nyapa. And this is north of the Mount Mulangi. Okay. This is a congregation right here on this lake right here.
Not Lake Sheridan?
No, it's, don't ask me questions like that.
How soon do you have to know?
Well, you assume too much, but this Lake Chira, Lake Chira.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very important part of the ecology system because birds fly out of Europe, land there, and then go on into South Africa. Yeah, it's a major place. But this is on a congregation, and over here, Mozambique. Okay. This is the congregation. Let's see if I got this one right.
That's a
Okay.
mango tree back there.
This is the Kacheri congregation. It is a relatively new congregation. And this was my first time to be there at this particular congregation. And they had a very good representation. They really did.
Isn't that a mango tree?
Oh, all these are mango tree. Well,
They grow
except
wild.
those. You don't ask me to, I could tell you. I'll just come back to that tree in a moment. Okay. 721, okay. This is Chilena congregation in Zonda district.
That's a nice tree.
Yes, they just completed that. And the other scene, go ahead, the other. This is Windy, and that's John
Now,
Slope's
this is where
house.
we live.
Yeah, and Paul lived over in this direction at first, and then the second time, right across this ground over there.
No, where is Windy on the map?
It is not on, well,
Sorry. What general area would it be?
Greg, you can just leave those on.
okay. Windy is in this area right here.
So it's out of Blantyre.
It's out of Blantyre, it's out of Limby. You can go out Limby and cross over these creeks here. But it's about in this area here.
About 24 miles from Limby.
Yeah,
From Blantyre?
from Blantyre,
Okay.
yeah, without any limit.
It's about 29 miles south of Blantyre.
Yeah, this is area here.
Yes.
Paul was in view of Mount Mulanje.
Mhm.
Let's see. Go ahead, Greg, thank you. This is Mulami congregation, and this Maluma, make that distinction here. This is the highest concentration of the Church of Christ on this earth. On this earth. This district here is the highest number of congregations. There were over 100 preachers in that general area.
Do you have any idea of how many congregations there are?
I don't know. It's thousands. Well, over 1,000. When you can see from the mountain here, out of Zone, mountain, and gaze in this direction, that's the direction you gaze in. It's incredible. It's incredible. This is what they call Moore congregation. That was a study. This is, in a sense, Davidson Kasandwe is the man behind this congregation being in existence. That was also a congregation. It wasn't new, but it was new to me when I visited there several years ago. That's in Mangochi District, by the way. Beautiful. This is Sudali congregation in Wanza, Loma.
That's the bathroom back there on the left.
I'll tell you what, too, when you go in there, you stand tall. I think Greg can explain that.
Hey, Jim,
Uh,
this brother here,
Chiroko.
is he not the oldest?
He's the oldest preacher in our brotherhood. He's 96 this year.
96.
96 this year.
That's old for over there.
Yes, it is. That is very old.
Yes.
Most of the people don't live like that. But clean living. Let's see,
I'm reaching for it.
this is the Sunday worship at Sazola congregation in Mulanje district.
Is that the church building on the right?
Yes, we sat underneath this canopy here. The women sat on the mat.
And services would last sometimes 2 or 3 hours.
Oh, my, tell me. And I think we've got some coming up with about 12 or 13 village chiefs, and sometimes they
That's
take
after
up
the
a
service.
yeah, after service, not before services, during the service, but after the service, they are allowed to speak. And let's see this one here. Chipini congregation, that's in Blantyre District. If you go where the crow flies, it's not too far from Blantyre. But the road that leads to there is a long way around. And because of the mountains that are there, there's a lot of mountains.
One out there, transportation.
Yeah,
I was
look at all
gonna
the
say,
bicycles.
This is their parking.
If you,
This is all their parking right here.
yeah, like this right here, there. But let me tell you, brother, you do not see what really is there. Those people, whenever they get a flat, pinch it in their teeth and pull it out and wrap thread around it to seal it off. And they go down the road, bump, 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 bump. But that's, I tell you, they are geniuses in improvisation. I'm telling you that. And these are the men that attended that meeting. This is the little preacher here. He's about 80 pounds, soaking wet. But boy, he is a powerful preacher. Really amazing man. This is a congregation. Let's see, I've got my 14 there. This is a Chirombo congregation in Mulanji district. It's many congregations
See the kind
in
of roads,
Mulanji.
kind of roads that you had to travel.
Yes, yes,
Dirt.
yeah, and it's, go ahead. Oh, that's a New Stage congregation out of Cholo. It's not very far from Cholo Boma. The Boma means the government. The government of Cholo is in Cholo, but the Cholo district, the government there has control of the district. And this is New Stage congregation.
Now that tall tree there, is a papaya tree, and
Yeah, that's the papaya there.
see the papayas underneath. They grow on the trunk.
Yeah, like that. This is Namadidi congregation. This building was actually built by Jerry Cutter many years ago. And of course, the
The
transportation.
transportation on the side.
Parking lot.
Looks like junk pile, but it's glasses.
Namadidi. Okay, 21. This is a congregation in Taka Taka. Now this is where that Davison had the right to be the village headman. This was in the area of his mother. His mother has since died. She was about 100 years old too. Yeah. But this is across from his mother's house, this congregation. This is what is Injala. Injala means hunger. And it is just near the Lake Chira here, about the center of the lake right here. Injala means hunger, and that's where the name came from. People were hungry.
And that's one of the footpaths back there in the back.
Oh, right, that
That's
path
footpath.
leads up to the preacher's house. And that is a congregation in, Oh, this was, Tirini congregation in Zoma District 2. This is a meeting that took place near, the Lone Way. And these are the brethren who attended that study. And these are people who attended the congregation there in Kasungu. We had a preacher in Kasungu, Brother Austin Katona, and the responsibility was given to him, given to another preacher, because Austin Katona, he was loaded, and his responsibility. We just had to do something with him. This is a
You mean he was
congregation
too
that was
overworked?
converted.
Yep.
Did you mean he was too overworked?
Yes,
He just needed help.
I'm sorry.
He just needed help in the area.
Oh, yes, we sent another preacher there to help him out. He just could not do it on his own. This Christadelphians, these people here, I want to tell you about this. There was a little preacher, maybe so tall. His name was Namweta, in Namweta village. He was the chief. He was of the Christadelphian faith. And they heard about us in Blantyre. And he contacted us and said, we are interested in the Church of Christ. And he had, I believe he learned it from Brother Moporo about us. And then we went up there. I said, why? I told him, I said, why do you want to become Church of Christ? And you do not know the Church of Christ doctrine. He said, well, in a sense, he said, teach me. And that's what I did. I taught them all day long on the fundamentals of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I started and left nothing undone. That man was converted, even along with these people like this. But Brother Namweta died the day that Davison Kasambwe's wife was laid to rest in her village, Katola village. Namweta, it was said, I was in Zimbabwe at the time when Sister Kasambwe died. That's an awful long trip. But that's a sad occasion like that. But Namweta, they asked him, they said, should we send for the missionary? He said, no, today is my day. This was on a Sunday morning. He said, today is my day. I want all of you here in this house to go to the church. You must go to the church. They all went to the church. He invited himself. And there in the house, he could not rise up from his bed. They went to the church here, this building here, and he, after the return home, he died. He died that day. He said, today is my day. And he said, I have nothing to worry about. Now, you're talking about faith. Brother, that is faith. That is faith. And I'm so glad that he contacted us to know what the Church of Christ really is. And he reveled in it. He was a good thing.
He obeyed the gospel, didn't
Listen, whenever they buried him, we had the rain come up. I had to go up there the next day for his burial.
he? But I mean, he was baptized.
Oh, yes. Yes.
That was faithful.
That was faith. And when we buried him, a rain shower came up, and we had to get down in the grave and dip it out to let his body there. And then they only rolled him up in his sleeping mat. If I had known that, I would have carried a coffin with me. But I didn't know that.
Well, that was customary.
Yeah,
How
but
far,
that
do,
was,
how far do they have to go to be baptized, Jim?
well,
More water?
it depends on the area.
Mhm.
In Mulangi, it's not. In some areas of Mulangi, it's a problem. But most of the areas in Mulangi and Zomba district, they can baptize people because the rivers flow out of the mountains. And so they have places there.
Okay.
That's Dwayne permanent.
He came out of that study, Modesto.
You like the green suit. They like bright colors.
That's Brother Teresa.
I'm impressed how well dressed they are. I mean, everybody's
Yes.
really reverent.
Modesty.
Well, you may see that same suit last year and the year before and
That's
the
all
year
right.
before that. And so this is
But
not
they're
true.
wearing their,
It's not true colors.
Mhm.
well, they're wearing their best.
Absolutely. And this was Maurice's last trip over to visit me in Malawi. He came with me to Malawi. I want to show you this for a reason. I was standing back at this entrance right here. When this right here was mud, it was not stable. As you can see here, this actually is below this level here. I saw about 3 or 4 feet came down, it was just a rushing water off of the mountain up behind here. And the water came over and washed that down. So this is not near the length of it because it goes around the church building and down the full length of the church building. We had to erect this wall here, and this is about a foot thick in order to stop the water from here. And I can't show you this, I can, but it's on my film at home. Where that I took and put drainage over here and down over here and out to the road. But I put this parapet here, it's about 18 to 20 inches parapet here, so that we could not drive off over the embankment there, because the house is up this way. But it was nothing to do except build a wall.
That's a retaining wall.
It's a retaining wall, absolutely.
Now, that's the back of your house there.
No, this is the church
That's the
building.
church
Well,
one.
That's the church building
Okay.
there.
I see.
Yeah. That's at the, I think this was the last trip I made. These brethren greeted me. Okay, This is in Kenya. This is George Odhiambo here, but you cannot see his face.
He's tall, isn't
Yeah, he is tall, about 6'1". Yeah, he stands at least 6'1". These brethren are part of that group that was converted to our persuasion on the cuts and Sunday school, and also the marriage question too. This was in Kenya. And there is yours truly on the east bank. Either direction, I can be the south of it, I can be the north of it, I can be the west of it.
Is that the Lions Club?
It's the Lions Club of Kisumu. Yes, that is the same Lions Club as in the States. Yes. Okay, this was a unique adventure for me. I say adventure, it was a privilege to do this. A preacher came to George and asked him if I would come up here, and this is the building right here. It was a Pentecostal church. And guess what the sermon was for that day?
Pentecost.
I preached on the basics of obedience to the gospel, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, and how it related to our baptism that they received at that day, the plan of salvation. And I enjoyed it very much, and nobody there was angry with me for it, because I didn't appear to them as a look down on them. I didn't do that. No way I would
Tell them how you told Greg and me you dealt with it. You certainly went by him.
Well, what I did in this respect, I said that the Bible says this, then I read it. The Bible says this, then I read it. The Bible says this, and then I read it. That's the way I approached it. And when you say the Bible said, the argument is not between me and those people. It was between them and their God. And so I approached it that way. And I have not been back. I would have loved to have gone back, but the responsibility with Lebanon, it was more than we could afford to go to Kenya and afford to go to Malawi. They elected to send me to Malawi. And consequently, the congregation at in Oregon, what's the name of that congregation?
You and Kevin Wilson?
Yes, but Galen.
Coach Grove.
No, it's not
He goes
congregation.
to Newwood.
Yeah, he is not in Cottage Grove any longer. He was there for many
He
years.
meets at Newburgh.
Yeah, at Newburgh. But anyhow, that congregation agreed to support George, and we supported Benny.
Yes, yes.
And that way we were saving money. And then Keith went over in this area over here, and he assumed the responsibility of teaching these brethren over.
Did any of these people convert to the Church of Christ?
I don't know if they were converted or not. I have not been back.